Hey, it's Jody. I found this awesome book. It's called Nellie's Christmas Eve. I thought it was really interesting. The story is interesting. It was originally published in 1890, and this one, it's pretty old. I don't think it's quite that old, but it says here it's mounted on linen, and it's by McLoughlin brothers, who were famous toy and game makers that you find, well, you don't find a lot, but you do find that they're toys and games from card games, especially from 1890s to 1900. But I've never seen a book that they've published. So this book right away intrigued me, and then the story itself is interesting. So I thought I'd read it to you. I mean, it is Christmas time after all, right? It's sort of poetic, sort of not. Some of the punctuation here and some of it isn't. So bear with me, if you will. It was just before Christmas, the last coming night fell in darkness and storm. Every object was white, with the soft drifting snow falling steadily down on the housetops and streets of a New England town. Underneath a stone archway crouched a small heap. A little child nestled as though fast asleep, but her dark eyes looked out through the pitiless storm, and she held her shawl closer to keep herself warm. Thus for hours had she waited, cold, hungry, alone, sad at heart and forsaken, yet never a moan had escaped her pale lips as her motionless form lay helpless, half frozen and drenched by the storm. A kind watchman at length, upon going his round, peering into the archway, the little one found, gently lifted her up in his strong arms and said, "Dearie me, little missy, why aren't you in bed?" So you can tell from the flowery language that this is definitely not quite of our time. "Why, because," sobbed the child, "I've not got any bed, for mamma, sir, you see, is what people call dead. Though she told me herself, when she bade me goodbye, she was going to heaven, and said I must try to be such a good girl that perhaps by and by the dear angels would take me up into the sky. 2 long nights I have waited, and yet they don't come. Do you think that their wings with the cold are too numb to fly down here and fetch me? Ah, then I must go, all alone by myself through the darkness and snow, till I find dear mamma and her home, for you see, I'm afraid she is crying and fretting for me. And tomorrow, they say, will be Christmas Eve. If I only could start right away, I believe we might spend it together. So please put me down and show me to the shortest way out of town." "But my child," said the watchman, "I can't let you go all alone on your errand through darkness and snow. I'll keep you tonight safely sheltered and warm. And if in the morning it ceases to storm, we'll talk of this journey to lands far away, which you never can reach in the course of a day." So poor little Nellie consented, and soon the bright light of the station house gleamed through the darkness of night. And the little one slept, after being well fed, till the daylight shone on her tiny straw bed. Then she sat up at once, and a look of surprise flitted over her face, while her beautiful eyes filled with tears for a moment. Then out on the floor sprang the little childish feet, gently opening the door. She noiselessly strode through the hall to the street, in the hope that somewhere she would certainly meet with her good friend the watchman, who promised that day he would start her for heaven and tell her the way. But in vain did she gaze into each passing face. He had disappeared, utterly leaving no trace. So she wandered and wandered till weary and worn with threading the streets since the earliest dawn. On a doorstep she sank, cold, exhausted, half dead. "Oh, I wish," said the child, "I'd a piece of bread." She had spoken aloud, and her words reached the ear of a little girl passing, who turned round to hear. She was dressed in rich velvet, and long golden hair fell her sweet face, which she shone loving and fair on the poor little outcast that sat at her feet. "Is it true, little girl, that you've nothing to eat?" "Yes, indeed," answered Nellie, and looked at the child. "Are you one of God's angels?" The little one smiled, shook her radiant tresses, and whispered, "Ah, no." "Then I suppose you can't tell me the way I must go to get soonest to heaven. I wish that I knew why Mamma went alone without taking me too." "And I wish I could show you," the strange child said, "but the pathway that leads to the home of the dead. But I don't know myself, and might lead you astray, though perhaps this may help you along the way." And poor Nellie beheld with great joy and delight a purse filled with coppers, all shiny and bright, which her new friend bestowed as she bade her good day, without waiting for thanks, and ran quickly away. So the poor little wayfarer started once more, never stopping to rest till she came to a store, where the windows were full of such bread, cake, and pies that that to see them was really a treat for the eyes. First she counted her treasure, and to her delight found she owned 15 coppers, all shiny and bright. 5 of these she invested in 1 loaf of bread, and the others will help me to heaven, she said. For perhaps if I ride but a part of the way, I may still reach Mamma by close of the day. When her bread was all eaten, she stopped a street car, crept up on the platform, and said, "Please, how far shall I get if I ride till the end of the day?" "Well," the driver replied, "I should certainly say quite as far as a child of your age ought to go." "That will do," answered she, in a voice sweet and low. Then she curled herself up in a soft little heap, and worn out with her journey, she was soon fast asleep. But a touch of her shoulder awoke her at last, and a kindly voice said, "Little one, it is past the right hour for return. Will you go back with me? For it's time I was starting my horses to see." "Oh, no, thank you," said Nellie. "I'd rather stay here. Can you tell me if heaven is anywhere near?" The old man shook his head in a queer, puzzled way, and replied, "Well, I really don't know what to say. There's some nice folks around here, if that's what you mean, but I guess, little young one, that you're pretty green, and that someone's been fooling you, telling you lies." Then the sweet childish face flushed with sudden surprise, as she gently replied, "But I know it is true, for that's where Mamma is. I'm going there too." So without saying more, the man lifted her down. Then he whipped up his horses and drove back to town. Once again little Nellie trudged onward alone, as the pale wintry beams of the setting sun shone on the snow, which extended for miles all around, clothing all things in white from the sky to the ground. Soon she came to the place where the road branched in 3. Then she seated herself on a fallen oak tree. "For," she said, "I'm so tired, I think I'll wait here. And perhaps Santa Claus, with his tiny reindeer, may soon come into sight, take me into his sleigh, and make sure of my getting to heaven today." With hope in her heart, but with feet cold and numb, in the twilight she waited. "Oh, why don't he come?" At last sobbed the child in deep accents of woe, then flung herself hopelessly down in the snow. There she lay all alone, while the fast-coming light followed close in its shadows the pitiful sight. When at length the poor wanderer lifted her head and uncovered her eyes with a feeling of dread, she espied a bright light from a house shining out. Then she rose with an effort, and turning about, with her dim, tearful eyes scarcely heeding the way, she half consciously followed its welcoming ray. Soon she found herself standing in front of a gate, which she opened and entered, the hour being late. All the windows were curtained and dark except one, and from that streamed a light like the ray of the sun. When the child in her wonder forgot all her fright, and her long weary tramp through the cold and the night, crept up close to the window and heard such a din of gay voices and laughter, she longed to peep in. So she climbed up the trellis, and then such a sight was revealed to her eyes that she shut them up tight. Then unclosed them again, so unreal did it seem, that she feared it might prove but a beautiful dream. In the room she beheld a superb Christmas tree, all ablaze with bright tapers, while laughing with glee. A frolicsome circle of gay boys and girls surveyed its rich treasures of candies and toys. The dark eyes that looked in from the casement above on this bright blessed scene of contentment and love, for a moment grew dim, the small hands lost their hold, for the fingers were numb with the frost and the cold, and the poor little child tumbled back in the snow with a sharp bitter cry full of desolate woe. The door opened at once, and a broad cheerful ray fell across the wide path where the little one lay. With her brown curls all tangled, her face cold and pale, and a look so like death that a pitiful wail rent the air, as the children, with sorrow profound, knelt about the poor wayfarer low on the ground. Then away from the darkness, the cold, and the night, little Nellie was borne to the warmth and the light. When the gay Christmas tapers shone bright overhead on what seemed like the face of the motionless dead, and the voices were hushed of the frolicsome hand, as they gathered around Nellie, while each little hand held up some gay treasure from far off the bright tree, saying, "Look, little girl, oh please wake and see what the dear Santa Claus, who was passing this way and paid us a visit, brought us on his sleigh. The sweet little doll is for you, and this dear little cup, and this book full of pictures. Oh, please wake up." As these words, little Nellie unclosed her great eyes, gazed around her a moment, and then said with surprise, "So I'm really in heaven at last? Do you know, I have traveled so far through the darkness and snow, and the way was so long that I didn't believe I could possibly get here to keep Christmas Eve. Kindly succor at last to the orphan had come. Gentle hands chafed the limbs that were helpless and numb, while a soft, loving voice whispered low in her ear, 'The dear Father in heaven has guided you here. You have come to our home on this blessed Christmas Eve, and you never again its protection shall leave.' And the sweet Christmas bells bore these tidings afar, till the echoes passed in where the gates were ajar, bringing peace and great joy to one angel of light, who had watched, helped, and guided the footsteps alight of the child she had once finally clasped to her breast, and who now, thanks to God, had found shelter and rest. For that day little Nellie was nurtured in love, while her mother looked down from the mansion above, breathing blessings and peace on these children of earth, who had taken her child to their hearts and their hearth. The end. A very interesting little book, and you can tell just from the flowery language that it was definitely early in the century or late in the 1800s when this book was published. Very nice and interesting little story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.